What up, y'all? It's Joe Budden, here to talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to win real money while watching football. You can get up to 100 times your money.
Prize Picks will give you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Just download the Prize Picks app and use code SPOTIFY. That's code SPOTIFY on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play a $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Must be present in certain states. Visit prizepicks.com for restrictions and details.
What's 2FA security on Kraken? Let's say I'm captaining my soccer team, and we're up by a goal against, I don't know, Soda Springs FC. Do we relax? No way. Time to create an extra line of defense and protect that lead. That's like 2FA on Kraken, a surefire way to keep what you already have, safe and sound. Go to kraken.com and see what crypto can be. Not investment advice. Crypto trading involves risk of loss. Cryptocurrency services are provided to U.S. and U.S. territory customers by Payward Interactive Inc., PWI DBA Kraken. View PWI's disclosures at kraken.com/legal/disclosures.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Northern Kentucky University political scientist Michael Baranowski. I'm joined today by my conservative counterpart, Cleveland area attorney and defender of freedom, Jay Carson.
Hey, good morning, Mike.
Hey, Jay, how are you?
All right.
Well, that makes one of us as
Oh, no.
well, you know, as our folks on the Discord know, I've been struggling for the last 11 days or so. Kimberly, my spouse, she's on a hiking trip in Central Asia. She's going to pretty much almost all of the stand countries except for Turkmenistan, which apparently no sane person goes to. And so, yeah, I'm doing my own cooking, which is never a good thing, certainly. But anyway, so I'm struggling through it. But the dogs miss the daily hikes with Kimberly, but they love the fact that they get to sleep on the bed at night. But that's, so anyway, here we are. Me and the dogs, not Kimberly. But we there's a lot we have to talk about that we didn't get to in the regular show. We want to get to. Well, we'll just start with the economy. We talked about that a little bit on the show, but not more directly. In the debate, Kamala Harris made a point of bringing up analyses from both Goldman Sachs and the Penn Wharton budget model. And both of these, according to Harris, concluded that her economic plans would be better for the economy than Trump's plans. Now, given the constraints of that debate format, Harris wasn't able to go into much detail, but hey, we have more than 2 minutes, so we can go into more detail. And on that, I want to start with that Goldman Sachs analysis. It concluded that if Trump wins in a sweep or with divided government, the hit to growth from tariffs and tighter immigration policy would outweigh positive fiscal impulse from maintaining tax cuts. Now, the Goldman Sachs estimates for Harris differ depending on whether Democrats win both chambers of Congress, which seems unlikely, a sweep. Now, in that unlikely event, a Democratic sweep, they concluded that new spending and expanded middle income tax credits would slightly more than offset lower investment due to higher corporate tax rates. And so there'd be only a very slight boost to GDP growth. In the much more plausible scenario of divided government, they found that basically there'd be what they call a small but neutral on net change in GDP growth. Now, what Harris didn't mention, understandably so, is that the overall difference between what would happen under Trump and what would happen under Harris, at least in terms of GDP growth, was fairly small. In fact, the Goldman Sachs CEO, David Solomon, estimated it as around 0.2%, or to put it another way, around $50-something billion in GDP change. So,
right, government spills more of that.
Yeah. So while Harris was technically correct in saying, she said in the debate, Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy, according to Goldman Sachs. A more, I'll call it faithful summary would be, Goldman Sachs says that my economic policy would make the economy a super tiny bit stronger than Donald Trump's policies. At least that was my take on it. Before we move on to the Penn Ward model, I want
it's almost like the Bob Dole 96, right? That he's brought, we've got growth of 3.2%. I can get you 3.23.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically kind of a 6 of one, half dozen the other thing, more or less, right? So I thought that would be your take as well. Now, the Penn Wharton analysis was a little bit different. It didn't focus on GDP growth. It focused on deficits. And that analysis concluded that Harris's economic plans would increase the deficit by using dynamic scoring, which kind of factors in interaction effects, $2 trillion over 10 years, while Trump's would more than double that, increasing the deficit by $4.1 trillion over a decade. And so I think on that, Harris's debate comment was more actually fairly in line with the analysis. She said the Wharton School said that Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. So, Jay, I mean, I know that you care a lot about growth. You care a lot about deficits. You care more about deficits than I do. You don't care about as much about them as Trey does. He's kind of a maniac on that. But what's your take on this? I mean, at least the Penn Wharton thing, that's a pretty significant difference there. So what do you think?
So here's my I don't want to say problem. It's just sort of a caveat, right? I think that we need to take these studies with is one, they're presuming here are things that actually get passed. Here's what gets passed. Here's what doesn't get passed. Here's the other parts of the program that neither one of them we're talking about that show up. Here are the new rules or regulations that, are yet to be even conceived of that make a difference. So I always would read these reports with an asterisk, right? And I think they appropriately have that if you read the whole thing. So as obviously we're estimating based on what people tell us and what we can glean. So I think that's about right. My concern is that any sort of if there's Democratic control of the White House and Congress, I do think you'll see more of a spending blowout that will increase deficits. With Republicans in Congress, there's at least some sliver of hope of fiscal restraint. I don't think it's a great hope, right? But
Sorry. I'm sorry. That's just hilarious. But
no, I'm with you, right? I think that's sort of the problem. I wish Republicans would have the fiscal discipline that they used to talk about. So in that case, I guess that's probably right. Now, I'm not a fan of the whole, here's economists tell us this, and economists aren't fortune tellers or prophets or anything like that. They can make estimates. They can make educated guesses. And I think that sounds about right. I think dynamic scoring is good, but there's a whole bunch of different kinds of dynamic scoring, even in terms of how you weight different variables. And that in and of itself, right, is a little bit of a guessing game. But so no, I think this is, the reports are probably spot on. Now, whether the Trump deficit piece increases that much, again, that's where I would say I think, not saying that the Trump deficit wouldn't increase as much as they're saying but that the Harris one might increase more. I guess where I would come in on.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. Time is luxury, which is why Polestar spent so much time designing the Polestar 3, their luxury electric performance SUV. It's designed to go further with up to 315 miles of range and immerse you in a unique listening experience powered by 25 speakers. Your favorite daily news podcast has never sounded better. All to make the time you spend behind the wheel of Polestar 3 the best time of your day. Book your test drive at Polestar.com.
This episode is brought to you by Vonage. Are you looking for a fast, affordable way to help your team work better together, even when they're apart? It's easier than you think. With Vonage Business Communications, your team gets a single application for voice, messaging, and video meetings that they can access from anywhere. Plus, it easily integrates with your CRM and other business applications to give your team the rich customer data they need to work smarter, not harder. Learn more at Vonage.com.
I'm glad you mentioned the importance of understanding the uncertainty inherent in this, because if a candidate's economic plans require the approval of Congress, that's a big uncertainty. And that's why I think it's important to point out that a lot of what Donald Trump is going to do, that is, well, says he will do, that is estimated to really add to the deficit, are things that he can do largely unilaterally. The tariff thing is certainly huge. The immigration thing is big. And so, I mean, those are, I think you would agree with me that those are both things where certainly on the tariffs, you have a big problem. You think that's bad economic policy. And I agree with you on that. And on immigration, certainly that's, regardless of what you think about immigration policy, certainly cutting off a lot of labor supply in a tight labor market isn't necessarily a good thing either. If you want a recipe for inflation, well, then just slap on a bunch of tariffs, big tariffs, and then cut labor supply, and you'll get your inflation. And so I don't know what economic world Donald Trump is living in. I guess he seems to think that if he throws these tariffs on, these other countries will just immediately fold and start being, in his words, fair to us.
Well, I mean, is the argument, and again, this is one that I don't subscribe to, but you know, my job is to make arguments. Is that, you know, that with less competition, there will be more American jobs created in manufacturing because we will be able to buy more of our own goods at home and export them elsewhere. I think the fallacy in that is, one, we would manufacture it at higher prices that we would sell it back to ourselves at, which would be inflationary. And secondly, the idea that we would, you know, getting into a trade war is always inflationary, in that you're paying more for goods coming from overseas because what they do is they reciprocate. Now, I've said a bunch of times before on the tariff stuff, right, that if you're imposing tariffs for the purpose of protectionism, I think that's inherently bad. If you're imposing tariffs as a punitive measure for bad behavior, for someone who is being a bad actor, not playing by the rules in order to get them to play by the rules, well, that may be a little different, right? If you can actually get them to come around and play by the rules. But that's not always certain.
Yeah, I feel like, not that he would ever do this, but I feel like someone should introduce Donald Trump to David Ricardo. Yeah, this is right. The idea of comparative advantage, that bringing back the sort of jobs that were the basis of the American economy 40, 50 years ago. It's just such a backward looking thing. Instead of trying to regain primacy in an area where we just don't have comparative advantage, and we won't have comparative advantage, it makes a lot more sense to look to the future and try to develop markets and develop areas where we can have that advantage.
Now, look, I think there's still other, get into complexities, as far as I think there are certain industries that we do want to, as a national security
absolutely
piece,
Yep.
defend and keep in America, right? That if we were to lose our ability to produce certain things and have to rely on foreign nations, some of them bad actors, I think that's a problem. So, there's also that would be my other exception to sort of tariffs protectionism, would be that national security piece, if it's done in the aid of that. And I think Trump's vision is that he thinks there are a lot of American workers who would take these jobs, assuming these jobs appeared. I don't know that that's necessarily the case. At the same time, I think there's maybe a little bit more of a not counting in the costs of immigration, just looking at the one side of, okay, well, we've got this labor, it'll be cheap labor, but not looking at the other costs of assimilation and benefits and so forth. So I could take issue with that. In my worldview, I do believe that immigration is a net plus for the economy, but legal ordered immigration, not just what we have right now. So I guess that's my take on that. I'm no economist, and I'm sure these people who put the reports together are much smarter than me, and did a whole lot of work and looked at a whole lot of charts and ran a whole lot of numbers. But if you're asking me as a guy with a rudimentary, I'm more than rudimentary,
yeah,
I'd say,
come on,
economic ability, that's my take.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Like I said, I thought we would be pretty much in line on that. And we're talking. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, I mean, for another though of something that who knows, right? The wild card, something like, for example, the Kamala Harris wealth tax proposal. There was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week about, look, what happens if that passes. Now, there's a couple things. There's one, if that passes, which I think is a long shot. Then the two, is it constitutional, which I think also is a long shot. But the outcome of, well, what if you are one of these really high net worth people who have hundreds of millions of dollars that you're now going to be taxed on? What do you do? Well, you probably unload it. That's bad for a lot of people downstream. And the article makes that argument that something like that could be a mass sell-off that takes a huge hit to Wall Street. That's, interesting. So anyway, what I'm saying is there are these other variables out there that we just can't predict policy-wise, because even if, one, we don't know the policy is going to happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, the legal ramifications. So.
Yeah, right. And there are a lot more uncertainties on the Harris side than on the Trump side because.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because, I mean, one, Trump, you've already seen how it worked one time. So you got kind of an idea of what he'd do. But Harris is a black box. And I think the idea that, we just don't know what else could in my view, bubble up from the fever swamps of progressivism, right? That could be drastic. For example, the price control piece, right? How does that play in? Well, they can't really analyze that because there's not really enough there to analyze.
We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo or @politicsguys or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com, and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,